Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Deep Roots Native Plant webinar. I'm your host, Sydney Ross, Outdoor Education Manager here at Deep Roots. We have a fabulous show for you today where we're going to learn about the operation of City Roots Nursery and Landscape, specifically how they grow native plants from seed. First, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Johnson County Park and Recreation District and Missouri Department of Conservation, for connecting us to nature in our backyards and beyond. I'd also like to thank viewers and donors like you for helping our programs along. Last month, you may have completed our end of season survey, for which we have one lucky winner who will receive our Deep Roots Native Plant Garden sign. And I went ahead and drew the name right before today's webinar. And I'd like to announce that Susan Dillard, you are the lucky winner of our Deep Roots Native Plant sign. So I will be in touch following today's webinar to get that sign to you so you can add it to your native habitat garden. Congrats, Susan. Our Planet Native Landscape Conference is happening in just a few weeks. This is a fabulous annual event that draws in experts from all over the region. Join us for 21 concurrent sessions, February 11th through 12th, here in Kansas City at the Kauffman Foundation and Anita B. Gorman Conservation Center. Tickets are limited and we are aimed to sell out, so be sure to register today at planetnative.org. This conference is a great opportunity for both native plant enthusiasts and professionals alike. For more information, visit us online. 3 times a month, I host Discover Native Gardening sessions at the Anita B. Gorman Conservation Discovery Center. This is an awesome opportunity where you can learn seasonal skills hands-on, enjoy camaraderie with a bunch of nature nerds, and feel empowered to take these skills into your own landscape. Right now, we're growing thousands of native plants in the greenhouse for Missouri Department of Conservation's Native Plant Giveaway on April 26th. So join me. Next week, we have a session where we will be planting native plants from seed, and you can take those skills and apply them at home. It's a really fun opportunity, and yeah, we have a great time. So consider joining us for an upcoming session. Save the dates. We have our Deep Roots Spring Native Plant Sales coming up. On the second Saturday of April, May, and June, we will be across the Kansas City area with our native plant sales. Today's guest experts, City Roots Nursery and Landscape, will be joining us at our Saturday, April 12th and Saturday, May 10th sessions. Our first one's going to be in Prairie Village, Kansas, followed by the Discovery Center in Kansas City, Missouri. For more information about vendors and dates, please visit us online at deeproots.org. This webinar will be recorded, and all the resources mentioned will be available online following today's episode. I will personally send you an email link with all the resources discussed in today's show. Don't forget, drop your comments in the chat. Let us know where you're tuning in from. And if you have questions for our guest experts, please put them in the Q&A. At the end of our presentation today, we do our live Q&A, which features a pop quiz. If you stick around, you have a chance to win this fabulous seedling ID guide for native prairie plants by the Missouri Department of Conservation. This is a really cool book. I've used it a ton as I've been growing plants in the greenhouse at the Discovery Center, just to become familiar with what these little seedlings look like. So be sure to stick around for your chance to win this awesome little seedling ID guide book at the end of today's show. Please visit us online at deeproots.org for more information on upcoming events, webinars, native gardening resources, and how you can get involved. While you're there, consider making a donation. All right, I'd like to welcome to the virtual stage today's guest experts, Kristen Wolf and Zachary Herman, the owners of City Roots Nursery and Landscapes and native plant nerds in their own right. Hey, Zach. Hey, Kristen. How's it going?
Hey,
Hello.
how are you all?
Good. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Kristen and Zach because they have a wealth of knowledge about native plants from growing from seed up to installing them in the landscape. In 2018, Kristen and Zachary started City Roots Nursery and Landscape to fill a void of native plant landscapers in the Kansas City area. When City Roots was first growing, it produced just enough plants for a few landscape clients and some weekly farmers markets. Kristen and Zachary started off by growing plants in their backyard using makeshift low tunnels and greenhouses. This eventually expanded into a sprawling nursery on several previously vacant lots next to their home. Today, City Roots Nursery produces thousands of plants each season and can grow enough plants for other native landscapers or individuals looking for native plants for their own landscape projects. City Roots retail location at 31st and Woodland is located only 10 blocks from where they started growing. This location opens each season in the first week of March and stays open until the last week of October. And folks, if you've been to our Deep Roots native plant sales, you've definitely met Kristen and Zachary. They are, again, a wealth of knowledge in this field. So thank you both for joining us today. What kind of projects have you all been up to lately? Got anything cooking for the new year?
Mostly we recently bought a new property up in Lawson, Missouri. So we're moving our growing operation up here. So we started doing that by seeding all of our baby plants for next year up here.
That's awesome. I love that.
Mhm.
And then it's a little bit bigger than our city properties. It's not huge, but it's a 9-acre property. So we're going to work to, it was a lot of just tall fescue pastures that we're going to work over the next years to restore. So we have more seed collecting opportunities closer to the nursery. And then, nursery wise, our big goal for this year is just to start to try to grow as many of the individual species in as many sizes as possible. In the past, we've usually just kind of always grown things in just quarts. So we're going to try to offer things in smaller 3-incher pots, and then also some species in larger containers as well. So that's will be an ongoing project, but it will be.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what growth looks like, isn't it?
Mhm.
I really enjoyed my visit to your all's farm up in Lawson, Missouri, and I'm super excited to see how it progresses. There's so much to be done, and it's going to be so rewarding, and I imagine a lot of fun too. So, congratulations on your new expansion.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started with today's presentation. Again, if you have questions for our experts, put them in the Q&A, and Zachary and Kristen will join us following the presentation to answer them live. Thanks so much.
I'm Kristen Wolf. This is Zach Herman. We're with the
City Roots Nursery.
We are a native plant nursery where we start everything from seed and then grow it until it becomes a plant that's ready for sale. And we started in 2018, and just this year we expanded our operation. And so today we'll be showing you seeding at our new farm. We chose to start this business because native plants seem to us to be the best way to support our ecosystem. And the deeper we got into it and the longer we've been doing this, just the more enthralled we are with the connections between the plants and the wildlife and the flora and the fauna, and just how much of benefit we can have on a small space. Like we initially started growing on vacant lots in the city, and within 2 years it was insane, the number of bird species that came back to us, the number of insect species that came back to us. So we're enthralled, we're totally in it, and we're just so excited.
2018, City Roots was just a residential landscaping business, and we were just trying to get people at first just to plant natives in their yard instead of just like your conventional landscaping plants. So then kind of over the years, always at first focusing on small scale projects, and then now over the years we can take on little bigger things. But so really just started as a small little native landscaping business in our backyard. Since starting off in a city, we didn't exactly have access to great big, huge areas to collect a lot of seed from. So off the bat, we were starting off, we purchased a lot of seed, or thankfully we have a lot of customers that came to our store that do have larger acreage, and they would either bring us stuff or let us go out and collect. And now we're kind of getting to the point that we're knowing a lot more people and just made a lot more connections that we can collect a decent amount of our own seed. And then that'll be the goal of this property, will be to make, kind of restore some areas so that we can have seed a little closer to the nursery.
Seed from Kansas City interacts better with the fauna out there. So you know, it's way better to grow a seed from Kansas City than it is from Florida, for example, or Maine, or even Minnesota. And so we try to get as local as possible.
Today's City Roots Nursery is going to show us how they clean native seed, sow them into pots, and get them ready for winter.
We use very basic little wood frame boxes with just window screen for a lot of stuff. These work really good for like liatris seeds to separate the little tufts from the end. We'll use just 5-gallon buckets with little flour sifters even. It will work pretty good for a lot of species. You can get like soil sieves, which work pretty good, and they'll have like multiple different screen layers so you can separate stuff out. And then I used to do photography, so I had all these old photography darkroom trays left over, which worked out perfect, but you could use any sort of like tray or something would be fine. And then for like breaking seed heads, drilling a hole in the top of a 5-gallon bucket so you can put a paint stir attached to a drill in there. Works very good. You'll use that for breaking up like coneflower heads or penstemons in when you're doing a bunch of them. So that's kind of easy. But for this little skull caps today, we'll probably just do something real simple and easy.
We can pretty much collect seed all year. Like we start in April with certain species, and then we just progress until like about now, or probably a month ago we should have stopped. But we just categorize all of our bags of where we collected the seed and then what date we collected to. These are hoary skull caps that we collected in August. The cleaner the seed, the easier it is for the seed to contact the soil. So example, with these hoary skull caps, they come in these big shells.
Yeah, so like each one of these little capsules just pops open, and that's just full. Here, I'll try to see if I can show it in my hand. And that's just kind of, if we have one that has any seed in it, that was a bad example of one. Well, I'm going to crush a bunch in here. But see this right here? So we're trying to get that seed as much separated from all this as possible. And for, you know, if you're just going to broadcast this out in your yard, whatever, that doesn't really matter. But if we're trying to sow a bunch of plug trays, or we want to use little nifty little tools once you get a cleaned seed that make seeding much faster, you know, or if you were going to do something even more mechanical.
So you just use the screen, so like this top layer looks like we've pretty well got the seeds out of that.
Nice.
And so now we're able to throw away the stem. So now here's the next layer. And so I'll just push, it looks like the seeds are kind of pushing through, and this screen looks like it's a little too small to catch some of the seeds, so we might go to just try a bigger screen and see if we can get a little more seed. Yeah, and then this, what we have here is pretty clean. So as I try to get the last little bits, I'm gonna preserve these.
Nice. You can see that they're using different size screens to separate the seed from the chaff. That way they have clean seed that is easy for them to sow in individual pots.
A lot of these native species, they need a period of cold, moist for a certain amount of time, which is called stratification, which is essentially, i.e. winter. So sometimes in the nursery settings, we'll fake that, and we'll like do things by putting seeds in coffee filters or sand and then putting those in Ziploc bags for 60, 90, 30 days, just depending on the species. Well, we've started doing a lot in our nursery now, which you can't take total credit for because Missouri Wildflowers absolutely hipped us to this, but it's just direct sowing. So that's what we're going to be doing today. And essentially what that is we're here in December now, and there are species that we know need 90 days of stratification. So we're going to sow those directly into pots, which is kind of what's all around us in this barn right now. And then those we're going to take out to the field after we've sown them, and we're going to just wet them real good and then cover them with frost cloth, and then they'll stay there all winter. And the spring we'll yank off the frost cloth, and then we're just essentially direct sow, naturally stratifying them outside. And then we always usually do like a backup. We have some stuff that we stratified in refrigerators that we sell in plug trays. It's like just in case, but this is how we do a lot of our perennial production.
you know, with our winters changing and not being cold all the time, like last year especially, we were a little bit nervous that we weren't stratifying for enough days. And so we put a few plug trays of every species in his cooler just to make sure that they're, at the right temperature for the right amount of days.
Yep. Use your home fridge too if you got an extra one, a little mini fridge. If you were doing this at your house, you know, you could like just sew some little trays, wet them, saran wrap them, and put them in your fridge for 30, 60, whatever, 90 days, and then yank them out. So you don't have to have a great big walk-in cooler, but it is nice if you have one.
Yes. Keeping your stratified seeds with your deli meats.
That's right.
These are unfrozen, unfortunately, today, so I kind of got to go through and rough these up real quick. But normally, if it's a nice day, you can just go with your fingers and make a little indentation or whatever. But it got a little cold in the barn last night.
The soil in these, we've used just like a basic compost mix with a lot of composted pine fines for the bulk of it. And then we use like a germination mix on top, so the very top layer is just like a little bit finer, a little bit nicer, so the seed can kind of sink in and get started. And then they'll go into their normal, like,
Our potting mix below, yeah. This is a stick that was perfect, that I've talked about that I need to drill a hole through and wear around my neck, because it's just perfect for everything. So finding we use a lot of sticks in our operation. We're very high tech around here, you know. But you know, you find a good stick, hold on to that. But you know, they make little things like this. They're just called dibble sticks, and they do make ones you can buy that you didn't just find laying around in the yard. But if you find one that lays around the yard, it's free, right? Yeah, that's right. Reduce, reuse.
And then most of these don't have to go pretty deep. A lot of them we're really almost trying to sow barely on the surface level once we push them in. There's certain species that we do like to go a little deeper. We've kind of found like Baptisias over the years that if we get those almost like a quarter to a half an inch below the surface level, we do get a lot more germination. So.
And yeah, sorry, go ahead.
most native seeds would like to be sown just like as deep as they are wide. And then some of them, if you have really, really tiny seeds, oftentimes they don't want to be covered at all. They need light to germinate. So just research your seeds before you sow them to know what they really want.
Some seeds require certain other than just stratification, more like you could have to scarify, or there's other methods, and one of those is Baptisia, and some of those you can do things like introducing, like for them, rhizomal bacteria that kind of help out with them wanting to germinate. Another one that we have to do a lot to is purple poppy mallards, or the calareos. Those, what we do is they like a boiling method actually. So what we'll do is we'll put boiling water on the seeds, let them soak in that overnight, and then we actually stratify for 30 days after that, and then we get a much higher germination rate. So, but yeah, just a lot of trial and error.
Yeah, trial and error, a lot of experimenting. You basically want to think about how the seed interacts with its environment and then try to emulate that. So if a seed is oftentimes like eaten, then it probably needs to be scarified. And then I'm not entirely sure why you boil a seed, what that emulates, but it just basically breaks down the chemical coat on the outside of the seed, and so it can start to germinate. We just sprinkle a little bit of mycobloom. A lot of times if you use mycobloom and then
Just like, native mycorrhizal fungi is what it is.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. It's from the prairies in Kansas. You can also spritz, if it's not so cold, with fertilizer that has like seaweed and kelp emulsion in it, fish emulsion, and that kind of helps the seeds after they first get started.
I kind of like using these little tea tappers a lot of the time. Sometimes you can almost pour out of the bag with some stuff, but.
And where can you find these little tools?
Pretty much any little garden center. You can
Planter seed.
yeah, in Kansas City.
Yeah.
You can go down there and get them.
Yeah.
When you put this on, you can kind of do it to what size you like. I usually go quite a bit bigger than whatever the seed is, just so I can have a good flow going. But if you're trying to be more dainty, you can go to a size that's almost just the size of the seed you're doing. So, and then we usually try, depends on the species, anywhere between maybe 2 to 3, 5 to 7 seeds per pot, and then yeah, just fingers crossed, you know. So once you kind of get on these other things going, you can just tap and just watch them fall right off the end there, and then once you think you got enough in, you just move right on to the next one.
As you can see, there are many ways to start your own seeds at home. Whether you use recycled containers or direct sow into the landscape, it's easy to get a head start on the upcoming growing season with native plants.
We're sowing this week seeds that need 90-day stratification, and then soon after that we'll start the 60-day, just to hope that we get 60 days of cold in this winter. But we keep the seeds organized as to like when they need to come out of the fridge and start getting planted. And so this is just our box of seeds that need 90-day stratification. So we have some of ours, and you can kind of see some days we were collecting and we needed emergency bags, and so not everything is totally organized, but we do purchase seeds mostly from Missouri Wildflowers, and then this year we tried Allendale in Iowa for a few of them, and
Nice.
then we've tried Hamilton can give you local ecotypes now too, which is kind of nice.
Yeah. And then, yeah, once they're seeded, then we just kind of, sometimes we'll top, depending on the species, like we'll either top dress if they need a little thicker, or we'll just kind of push the seed back over, or ones that need light. Actually, one nice trick that you can do is you can use sand. And then sand will still let a lot of light through, but it's some weight on your seed, so as you're transporting your tray, it's not just bye little thing. So yeah, a little bit of sand, not even all buried in sand, but a little bit of sand can help. So pretty much that next step after this is they'll get loaded in the truck, watered on a day that's nice with the hose and a mister. Today, since it's so cold, unfortunately, it'll be a watering can. But and then we just do that mainly, so that way as we're driving them in the truck over to where they're going, they don't get blown. If you were just carrying your tray, you could just probably set it down outside and wait for the next rain or whatever. So.
We like to recycle the pots as many pots as we possibly can. You can kind of see this is one from last year that had a yellow coneflower in it, and now it will have a hoary skull cap in it. I've seen a few pots that have been recycled like 3 or 4 times. So we get a lot of our customers returning our pots, which is great. And then for the most part, the pots that we recycle are ones from us, other local native plant nurseries in Kansas City, and then from Missouri Wildflowers. So we kind of know what plants were in there, and we know that the fertilizer used or the potential pathogens and stuff are low. Most people wash their pots. We don't, because it's a huge workload, and we've also never had any trouble with root rot or like systemic problems with like pathogens that might be in the pots. I think if there were pathogens, it would be localized to the specific pot that came back to us, and so maybe that plant doesn't make it. But if you're growing indoors whatsoever, you do want to wash your pots, because it's way easier for like fungi to grow. These plants are going to go outside under a frost cloth all winter, and then the frost cloth is going to be removed, and they're going to be out in the sun and the wind, and they're going to have to just compete for their life like the rest of the native plants out there. But that usually helps just like the typical pathogens that you find that are inside the pots that you would want to wash out if they were in a greenhouse.
Yeah, we're not getting like greenhouse pests like aphids at scale, or really, like stuff like that's not happening growing outside. Other than, aphids on milkweed, of course. But
Yeah. And then, we get root rot with the usual species that get root rot, but we don't have major problems like you would in plug trays in a greenhouse. In years past, we have grown some plants in plug trays and kept them in a greenhouse that was like totally covered. And we tried different methods. We tried like vinegar and water for one, and then we tried bleach and water as well. And both seemed to work just fine. And we just had minimal issues doing it. A lot of people don't really think about it, but like traditionally our time of drought in Missouri is the winter time. And so if you're hoping for snow or rain, it might not come for a month. And so just watch the weather. If we're not going to get any precipitation at all, maybe make sure your seeds are still moist.
Yeah, so then we pretty much just line out rows here, and these other bays you can see are kind of some that are already covered up. And then periodically, like Chris was saying, if it doesn't rain, we can come out and we can just hose these down once, so that way we know the seed is staying moist under there. Water just goes right through this, and but it also kind of keeps birds from very easily accessing all, not that I don't want birds to eat the native seeds, I just want them to eat them off of plants, not the ones in my pots. Helps us just keep, you know, the seed in place.
These seeds that we're seeding right now will start to germinate in March, April, or May, depending on the species, and then they really won't be ready for sale until next fall. And so we'll put them up for sale next fall. If they don't sell, then they will overwinter and then be ready the next year. And so right now, when our shop opens on March 5th of next year, we will have plants that we seeded last year, and those will be the ones that are ready for sale. So if you wanted to do everything on your own, like collect the seed and then grow the plant out and then plant it in your garden, it would take you 2 years. And so you would like collect the seed this year, 2024, plant it in the fall, and then you would, if you chose to plant them in small pots, you would want to keep them in the small pots until they're strong enough to go in the ground. And so that's going to be at least 5 or 6 months depending on the species. It could be a little longer even. And so the earliest you could plant would be like fall of 2025, but most likely like March of 2026. So it's a long con.
Compared to like plug tray, like if you go into a plug tray where you're growing a transplant, then that's going to get transplanted into a larger container. That takes the plant that much longer to mature because we've disrupted its roots somewhere in the middle there. But one advantage of this direct sow method is, since we don't even have to transplant these until they're ready to go essentially into someone's yard, these plants they're ready for sale much quicker than a method where you are first sowing in plug trays, then transplanting into containers. Yeah.
And then if you were a homeowner and you were just doing this for your own yard, there's different reasons why you would sow like directly into the soil or directly into a pot. If you sow in the soil, it's best to do with a lot of seed. You have a lot of things that you're gonna combat, which would be like wind and birds and then mice and voles, I know, or like little chipmunks, like little rodents like to eat the seed. And so if you can broadcast a lot of seed and like hope, then most likely you'll get some that'll make it. But if you don't have a lot of seed, sowing in pots is the best way to do it because you can just control it a little bit more. And then you don't have to sow in black nursery pots. It doesn't have to be as organized as this. You can sow in anything. Just make sure that it has drain holes. And so once the seeds start, the roots don't rot. You can put dirt in that container, put the lid over it, put it outside right next to your garage and just set it and forget it until springtime. Open up the lid when it starts to germinate and just grow in there. So
Once the seeds are sown and brought outside, they're covered with frost cloth. Water easily soaks through the cloth, watering the plants. And now we just wait for spring. Stick around for our live Q&A coming up next, where you can ask our guest experts, Kristen and Zach, questions about growing plants from seed. Okay, fabulous. Zach and Kristen, I'm going to go ahead and welcome you back to our virtual stage. That was such an informative episode, and every time, because I create the episode, but every time I've watched it, I've learned something new. So I just really appreciate you all sharing your information with us and inspiring us to add more native plants to our landscape. So thank you for that.
Of course.
Awesome. Okay, so folks, we've got Zachary and Kristen here, of course, from City Roots Nursery. If you have questions about native plants, how to grow them, or anything related to that, please put them in the Q&A, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, so Julie's asking about frost cloth. They're asking what it is. If you could just kind of describe like the material a little bit and also where one might find frost cloth, I think that'd be helpful.
yeah, there's a store online called Greenhouse Megastore. It's accessible to everybody. You don't have to have an account. So I would advise going there. And then it's just a very light woven cloth. I'm not exactly sure the material. It feels like cotton.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, sometimes maybe like, yeah, we suggested planters in the video, but in Kansas City area, maybe planters down or where I would have it. But yeah, it's lots of times vegetable farmers you'll see have it to put over row cover to like keep frost off like early or like cool season stuff.
Mhm.
But yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I've used it in my veggie gardens before. And I really love that you can just water right over it and the water goes through, so it's super convenient. Okay. Another question from Julie. Um, they're asking about the growing medium in the pots. Can you remind us what the growing medium is that you used? And then I have a second part of that question after that.
So in our direct sow pots, we use on the bottom, like more or less like 3/4 of the pot is our major soil mix, which is pretty much just made up of like compost, what my brain is playing, pine bark fines and turfus and a little bit of sand in there. And then where the seed goes into, you could do a lot of things. We like using a coconut core based potting medium, but you could use whatever. We just try to avoid like peat moss or whatever. But yeah, something that's just light and will be easy for the seed to start off in or whatever. So
Nice.
Anything labeled like seed germination mix.
yeah, yeah.
Cool. Do you by chance use Cultivation Nation? No.
No, the one we use is Coco Bop or Coco Loco
Mhm.
by Fox.
Okay, I think it's the same Happy Frog, like
Totally,
rich.
yes, in that same world. Yeah,
Love
yeah,
it, yeah.
yeah.
And can you a note on that peat moss? Can you explain why we're moving away from peat moss in the nursery industry?
Well, you can take it if you want.
It's one of those products that's just really confusing to find like a good alternative. But peat moss is it's like a non-renewable resource, and so once we take that peat moss out and use it for these pots, it doesn't come back for a really long time. But the coconut core isn't, the perfect substitution
Right.
either. There's kind of some difficulties in that um, manufacturing process, but
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's good to know. I've also switched to coconut coir, so I was happy to see that and just curious about, yeah, your reason for it. So yeah. So if your potting mix is especially dry, like when you're filling your pots, is it helpful to moisten the soil at all with like a spray bottle, or how do you just wait until you water them in? Like how do you approach that?
So yeah, getting a moist is nice just for if you sometimes it's even nice to have it a little moist when you're seeding into it because it just like the seed grabs to the soil a little easier. Sometimes you're doing little dainty seeds. We'll even use tweezers sometimes, and it's if the soil is a little moist, it's easy to have it just like pull away from the tweezers. Um, but we use in the nursery, you can get like they're called faucet nozzles, but they're essentially like mister heads you can get that attach to the end of your hose or a gardening wand, and you can get a very even fine mist. And but you could use the mister head on your normal little garden, whatever spray nozzle would be fine too.
mhm.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, and what size and depth of pot do you generally use?
We'd been using these quart pots that were like 4.5 inches wide by 3.5 inches deep, I
Mhm.
think. And then these smaller pots that are like 3 inches deep and maybe an inch and a half wide,
Yep,
I
I
think.
think so. Yeah, or 2 inch wide.
Okay, cool. So, depending on the type of plant root, right, whether it's a tap root or rhizomatic, does that inform the size pot that you use? Like, yeah, it does. Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. And then, yeah, if we grow anything in 1 gallons, it'll be because it has a deep tap root and it is like suitable for that
And
environment.
then using trays is a big thing that we found that we like absolutely have to do for things that do tap roots. Like back in the day, we just really couldn't afford to have trays for the bottom of all these things. We just lined the pots out. But like things like, for example, Missouri Evening Primrose, it just has a taproot that goes so quickly that it will weed go right through the bottom of that container, right through our weed mat and right into the ground. And then if we go to pull them for sale, it's like we just snapped like half the root system off. So that's a speed. There's a lot of ones like that now, but that's one of the first species we learned. Like, okay, we have to sow these in pots in trays, so that way there's like some layer between the bottom of that pot and the soil, even the weed mat, because they'll just grow right through it.
Good to know. Yeah, I that's a really funny visual for me, and I can totally see that happening. Um, and that's good to know that you can like kind of create an extra buffer to
Mhm.
discourage that kind of growth.
Yeah.
Okay. Everett is asking how you protect the seeds and young plants from critters. Now, um, yeah, I'm curious how you go about that in your operation.
Well, I will say we have built-in death loss, so we just expect for squirrels to dig up a certain number of pots.
Mhm.
And then you can use like hot chili oil or
Yeah.
hot chili like powder to
Like
sprinkle in
cayenne.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, to try to keep the critters from eating the seeds. But the frost cloth is our biggest barrier.
Yeah.
So we tuck that under the pots, and then we can kind of see if any critters are getting under there to eat the seeds. And then we just kind of mitigate with like, yeah, physical barriers really. But
Nice.
yeah, I think instead of fighting, just allow them to eat a little bit,
Yeah.
and then just expect that, you know.
For containers, you don't want something to dig in, like there, for example, there's some species that will have to like sow in the spring and then wait all the way. So like celandine poppies, like Dutchman's breeches, some of these ephemerals. So what we'll do with those is, since it's like a whole season of a pot sitting out, or sometimes multiple seasons, we'll put like, if people know what hardware cloth is, or you could use chicken wire, but you could roll that out over top of your pots to keep critters out. The downside of doing that is it makes it a huge pain to weed.
Oh yeah.
So you got to keep it on it weed wise with that, but it will keep squirrels from digging.
Good to
So
know.
I've had done that before. Yeah.
Something else that I've done is getting large rocks, like large enough that, and this is more for seedlings that have already emerged. Because I'm doing some like winter sowing in my backyard. And I have pots that are covered because they're like old produce containers, but then my big pots immediately squirrels dug up things thinking like, oh, I'm sure I planted a walnut here. And so if I put some large rocks in there strategically, I have found that also deters them. So
That's a good
Yeah.
idea as well.
yeah. Okay, River is asking what the name of your little green tool, the seed tapper, is. Does it have another name? Do you know?
I'm sure it does.
Okay,
But
no worries. I will look it up and I will include it in the
okay.
resources following today's show
Yeah.
because I also call it a tapper. I also call my pruners clippers. So I've got lots of fun names for things that
Yeah.
you may not always find them. Okay, let's see here. We've got lots of great questions in our Q&A. Okay. Do you have any suggestions to treat gnats in potting soil? I know you all do a lot of your, you keep your plants outdoors, so I don't know if you run into that issue, but do you have any suggestions there?
No, I don't think so.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
No,
No, I don't
that's
know.
all
Yeah.
right. That's all
Yeah.
right. I do have a suggestion that has been working so far for us in the greenhouse at the Discovery Center. You all saw that we're hosting Discover Native Gardening sessions where I'm teaching folks to grow native plants from seed for the Discovery Center's giveaways, and we get fungus gnats. It's like our number one issue. So we use mosquito bits, like the granulars, and we will soak those in a watering can and then kind of pour it over the top. And that's just freeze dried bacteria that's naturally occurring in our soils. And it does eat the fungus gnat larvae.
Mm.
And with the fungus gnats, they will eat the root systems of these tiny seedlings and just like decimate pots. Um, for us, the best uh, order is prevention rather than treatment. So you all mentioned like making sure you clean your pots. If you're using recycled pots before you bring them in a greenhouse, that's really effective. Not bringing in outdoor plant material or soil into that greenhouse, trying to keep it nice and clean. Those are some things. And then I also use like those yellow fungus sticky traps. So those are some things that we have found useful in our greenhouse. Okay, Anne is asking, when you overwinter plants, do they stay outdoors? And do you upsize the pots in the fall or in the spring? By which I think they mean like, do you transplant them into bigger pots later?
Yeah, we keep everything outside over winter, and then we'll keep all the pots close together. And then some years we've put mulch around the outside of that cluster of pots just to keep them the roots from freezing. But no, we don't upgrade from like fall to spring.
Cool.
The only trick to doing that is we mentioned in the video, sometimes we go through a long drought in the wintertime. Just make sure, especially if it's going to get down to -1, like it's going to get down to this weekend, that those pots are moist. And that
Okay.
way it doesn't make air pockets for super cold air to come in and kill the roots.
Oh, that's smart. That's really good advice. Um, okay, let's see. Um, so speaking of watering seeds, Garrett Anderson is asking. First, he says, "Hey, great video." Uh, do you all have a hard start date on when you start watering these seeds that you are germinating?
The moment they hit the soil.
Cool.
Yeah. So we watered the day we put them out, and then thankfully this winter we've had a lot of snow right now.
Yeah.
But there has been past winters when we've done this, and it has not snowed much or rained. And when we've checked under the frost cloth, it's dry under there. So we just wait for a day that's warm enough to use the hoses and go out there and water.
Mhm.
So pretty much we just kind of try to keep them moist but not drenched until we start to see germination occurring. So.
Okay.
Yep.
Val is asking suggestions for easy seed scarification of small amounts of seed. If you don't scarify, will germination be less or none?
It's only this, not all seeds need to be scarified for one. But if it's a seed that needs to be scarified, sandpaper is really nice. And you can just mess around with different grits of sandpaper.
You can just put two pieces together, like down in a bowl or a plate is like a really easy thing to do, and just put one piece down at the bottom, and then put your seeds, and then you have your other piece, and you could even just do that with your hand, and that would work okay. But for small amounts of seed, you could do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And the germination is a lot better if you can scarify.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Nice. So my team just told me that the seed tapper is called a dial seed sower, or
oh,
dial
I-
garden seeder sower. So thank you, Stacia, for that. I was curious about that. Okay. Anonymous is asking if you're going to sell plants at Brookside or Lenexa Farmers Market this year. Can they look forward to seeing you there, or should they look for native plant sales?
we have plans to go to Lenexa. We might not make it to Brookside this year. Uh, we're having a baby in March, and so we're severely reducing the different locations, offsite locations that we're going to sell at this year.
Y'all, congratulations. I'm so excited
Yep.
for you. Yay. You have a new little seed helper. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah.
So
He's due the day before opening day, so if there are a couple hiccups first week,
Yeah.
that's what's
Bear
going
with
on.
us.
Yeah.
good to know. We will all be super gracious and understanding as you welcome your little one into the world. Congratulations. And I'm biased, but I love a March baby, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Someone is asking if there are certain native seeds that are easier to grow for beginners. Y'all have any advice of a handful of seeds that might work well for folks who may not be as familiar with the process?
Yeah, rudbeckias and echinaceas would be like really great ones to start with.
Monardas.
Yeah, monardas
Mhm.
and asters. And then milkweeds are really fun, but sometimes they have low germination. So just buy extra milkweed seeds, and they pop up quickly, which is nice. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I think lots of the grasses are pretty easy
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
Like,
grasses.
little blue stem or big blue stem. It's pretty easy. Sitos grow on that.
Mhm.
So,
Eyelash grass is a fun one too.
yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Totally.
Yes. There's something magical about growing a plant from seed. I remember the first time the first plant I ever grew from seed was radishes like years ago. And it
Mhm.
just made me feel so connected with the earth and kind of like a superhero. I was like, oh my gosh, I did this. Like I made this happen. I brought life into this earth. It's like very cool. So.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna pause on our Q&A. We still have lots of really great questions, but I want to go ahead and we're going to do our pop quiz. So, Kristen and Zach, would you all want to ask today's pop quiz question for folks? While you're pulling that up, I will just remind folks what we are giving away today. We have this fabulous seedling ID guide for native prairie plants by Missouri Department of Conservation and Grow Native and Natural Resources Conservation Services, NRCS. It's really fabulous. I always recommend you all get familiar with your seedlings because whether you're sowing them in pots or in your landscape, when they're coming up, they're really tiny and it's easy to misidentify. Now, labeling, of course, helps, but I think it's fun to become familiar with them visually. So, okay, so if y'all want to go ahead, if you're ready to ask today's pop quiz question. And oh, and before you do, folks, when they ask this question, we will give this away to the first person who correctly answers the question in our webinar chat. So go ahead, Kristen and Zachary.
Okay. What is the name for the process of treating seeds to simulate certain natural conditions, such as cold and moist periods a seed needs to go through before germination can occur? A, stimulation, B, scarification, or C, stratification?
Oh my gosh, folks were like on this even before you finished the question. And I'm super excited to say that Beth Dringenberg, you were our very first person to answer this correctly. So congratulations. You all are fast and furious. So Beth, I'll connect with you so that you can get this awesome seedling ID guide. And thank you all so much for playing in today's someone said they didn't even get to start typing before a bunch of people filled it out. So, super fun. Thank you guys. Okay, so let's dive in. We're going to answer just a few more questions. And for the ones that we don't get to, I will see if Kristen and Zachary have time to answer them and then later, and then I will forward that to you all in our resources. So let's just take a few more questions here. Yeah, so I guess folks are really surprised that you're not using a greenhouse necessarily. Can you just, I know that we covered this in the episode, but can you just talk about that a little more? Like why don't you use a greenhouse? Why is it not necessary?
Well, just since like we just the whole time in our nursery, we've just always very minimally used the greenhouses. It's like since all these species are native anyway, um, we just don't see a reason to just not just use the natural occurring, cycle of the seasons. So we can stratify outside on their own. They go dormant and there maybe could be advantages of using a greenhouse of like getting things to like start growing a month sooner. But for the most part, we just kind of feel like it's better to just let them pop up when they normally would, because then we know that the plants are hardened off and ready to be used for people's projects.
Yeah.
So
some of you that have been to the shop before might notice like the greenhouse growing would be a benefit for us because we could grow plants at like a larger like section of the year. Like we could start plants early, like you said, or keep plants greener later, and they would look cuter and nicer in the pots and not like eaten by bugs sometimes. But it's not as good for the customers to have those plants because they're not necessarily hardened off. So if you were to buy something that started early, it started itself early because it thought it was safe to start when it's really not outside. And then like wind blown plants too, like you want your plants to have strong stems. So you want them to experience wind outside. And that might mean that a plant in a pot is growing crooked in something that's been grown outside.
yeah.
But it's gonna have the training to be able to live in your garden a little bit better. So
Yeah, that's awesome. To me, it sounds like they're just better adapted to
Totally.
yeah,
Yeah.
that makes complete sense. And I love that you get to work with the seasons and work with nature in your process to bring nature home. So I think that's just a really beautiful connection in general. So, okay, I've got two more questions I want to ask you all. Um, Anonymous says, I tend to sow too many seeds in a pot and end up with many sprouts crowding the pot. Story of my life. Do you have any advice for thinning out plants?
oh man.
Yeah, depending on the species, we'll sometimes sit there and tediously divide them out if we just need more of that species. But sometimes if it fits us in like a plug tray or something, we'll just and you're just gonna kill them all dividing. We'll just throw the whole thing in the ground or in a bigger pot and may the strongest survive or whatever, I guess. But you could thin them. You could sit there and you could use snippers or little pruners, and you could snip some of ones off so that way you're not, because sometimes when you do pull one, like let's say there was a whole cluster and that you yanked one out, it might disturb the roots of all the neighbors. So if you want to be really safe, you could sit there with little tweezer pruners and choose the winner.
Yeah.
That's really smart. Actually, I'm going to take your advice on that because, as I mentioned, we're sowing seeds at the Discovery Center, and Rudbeckia was the first to emerge. And those seeds are so small, and there's like 10 in a low
Mhm.
cluster, and like you can't, that's just not sustainable.
Yeah.
So I will be trying that little snippy method and let you all know how that goes. So.
All right.
Okay, and for our final question today, Brittany asks, do you have recommendations for finding local ecotypes? I'm on the western border of central Illinois in Quincy, and it's a bit of a desert for native resources. Also, how long before a non-native ecotype becomes adapted to the area and can be considered a local ecotype?
Well, second question first. We're not sure, and then the research out there on like what insects can interact with what like non-local ecotypes and like the um, whether they're disrupted or not is still emerging. And so, I mean, a lot of scientists have just done like one specific bee species to one specific flower, and kind of in general, they're realizing that these ecotypes that it's just safer for all of these insects that we haven't studied yet to it's just safer to assume that they need to interact with their local ecotypes rather than ecotypes from far away, but we really don't know. So I don't know, to play it safe, use local ecotypes. And then as far as resources go, you can ask specific seed companies where they collected, and that helps quite a bit to know like what county they collected from, whether you want to buy that seed or not. But Hamilton's getting better about that. I'm not sure if Missouri Wildflowers, sometimes they know the county.
Yeah, but it's always if you're in Missouri, Missouri Wildflowers is always from Missouri, so that is at least that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know Hamilton collects in Illinois sometimes. So, and then Pure Air natives too might.
Yeah, in your area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really good to know. I know we've had Merv of Missouri Wildflower Nursery come to the Discovery Center and specifically our little blue stem strip. And he was like, oh, I got this one. Like he could tell just by looking at the plants. I got this one from this county, this one from that. Like it was really remarkable. And I'm sure that was just like one of those things, but it just goes to show that there's variation. And like you mentioned in our video today, Kansas City or regional ecotypes work better for our regional wildlife. So I think that's just like generally a good rule of thumb.
Hmm.
Okay. All right, y'all. Well, I want to thank you both again for joining us today for this very informational webinar. Folks, if you are signed up for today's webinar, which you are, you will automatically get a notification about our next episode, which is native plant webinar, Pruning Trees with Missouri Department of Conservation. We're going to have Taylor Neff, urban forester from MDC, join us and teach us how to prune trees. So be sure to tune in on February 6th for that special episode. And Zachary and Kristen, thank you so much. We look forward to your opening day of your nursery. And remind us again what day your nursery opens.
March 5th.
March 5th. And then you can also see Kristen and Zachary at our Deep Roots native plant sales, which are coming up as well. Thank you all so much and happy gardening, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.